Hi, so have you ever had your natal chart done? Welcome to this week's episode of the Wildflower Woo Woo Show. I had a really cool spot picked out to do it and everything, and I had service when I picked out that spot, but then when I tried to start the show, I couldn't get service. So now I'm driving around trying to find service and a good spot to do it in, but it won't change any of the information that I had prepared for you today. So if you're not sure what a natal chart is, in today's episode of the Wildflower Woo Woo Show with Michelle Wildflower, that's me, we're going to discuss that so you have a little bit more of an understanding what your natal chart is, what the different houses are, what the signs are, and a little bit about the planets, but not really too much. So first of all, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate your patience in this episode while we try to find the best location where we can do it. Let me grab my papers that I have for you guys. Okay, so I live in a really beautiful location, and I was down there on the beach. I was going to try to do it down there. I thought that would be great, but and like I said, I had service when I started. I had my light set up and everything, so I didn't have to hold it. So I apologize for the that it's not exactly the way that I wanted it to be, but I think that this will work. We can make it work, right? Okay, there we go. Next best way. Okay, so I'm Michelle Wildflower. I am the host and facilitator for the Women's Empowerment and Spiritual Awakening Retreats, and we host them twice a year. The next one that's coming up is actually August 3rd and 4th, and that one is a mother-daughter retreat, and it's hosted lakeside at, not this lake, but Lake Memphremagog, which is a beautiful lake in Newport, and very close to Canada. We're about, less than 20 miles from the Canadian border, much less. This lake right here, where I'm at right now, this one's like 20 miles from the Canadian border, and the retreat is much closer, actually. And so we have a fun weekend planned for the mother-daughter pairs, and we actually have 2 spots left. So if you feel drawn, then you should sign up soon, because they're going fast and they're limited. So anyway, talking about your natal chart. So your natal chart would be something that you would get done by someone or printed out, and it has to do with the time that you were born. So you put in the time and the place, and it depends on where all the planets were lined up at the moment that you were born. It has a big influence, and a lot of can have a lot to do with your characteristics, your traits, your personality, who you are, what you enjoy, habits that you have, right? So it was a bummer. My printer didn't have a lot of ink for this one because it was colored. So I'm going to try to hold it so that you can see it. And you can see there's the circle right there, and that tells you the different planets. I have another one, don't worry, that's going to show you the houses, but it's just not my chart. And so basically it shows you, like where the sun was on the horizon when you were born. It shows you your moon sign. It shows you what house. So there's 12 different houses. And this is a visual of the, like the wheel. And these are the houses with the signs in there. And each, sign has its own characteristics because of its ruling planet, which we're not going to really go over the ruling planets today because that could just be a whole episode in itself. So, but what we are going to talk more about is the houses. So I figured everyone knows about signs and you can look those up easily, but a lot of times people don't know about the houses. And where your sign falls in which house has a lot to do with your life, what's important to you, the endeavors that you embark upon, and your goals and dreams, and whether in family is important to you, or whether you're more of a loner, whether you're someone who's fascinated with death or whether or not. So then, when I learned astrology, they taught us that Pluto was a planet. I know that now, there's new information that Pluto is not a planet. But then, that just makes me wonder about Scorpio. What's Scorpio supposed to do? Maybe they've already figured this out and I just haven't heard about it. But Scorpio, I was taught, was ruled by Pluto. And Pluto is a planet of mystery and intrigue, and people who are ruled by Pluto usually are kind of, they could be people who sometimes others consider someone who's, could be on the dark side or fascinated with death, or someone who's had a lot of close death experiences, someone who might have even had a near-death experience or might have actually died and came back, so it has to do with the other realm of the underworld and just, other stuff like that. Whereas a planet, a sign like Cancer, to them, family is real important, and so if we were to talk about this a little bit, Aries is where it starts. And so that's like the first sign. And I'm not sure if you know, but each of the signs corresponds with a element. So it could either be air, water, fire, or earth, right? And there's 3 signs in each element. So the air signs would be, like Gemini and Libra and Aquarius. And the fire signs would be Aries and Leo and Sagittarius. Sorry, I haven't looked at this in a while. But and the water signs are Pisces and Cancer and Scorpio. And then the earth signs would be Capricorn and Taurus and Virgo. So basically, earth signs usually are kind of grounded. Air signs might be kind of, good at communication and speaking, and or they, they could be a little airy too, but usually they're good with communication, depending on, everything else. There's so much going on in a chart. But this is the ascending line, and that would be like your ascendant. That would be like whatever planet was here at the moment that you were born. Sometimes if people find that they don't really seem like their sun sign, whatever, planet that their sun sign is in, like you're not really like that. You read your horoscope and it always says all these things and you're like, yeah, not me, right? But if that happens, then you might be more like your ascending sign, which is your rising sign. And that's the planet that was on the horizon at the moment that you were born. So if you have your chart done and then you see which sign your rising sign is in, sometimes that explains a lot, and you're like, oh, I'm a lot more like that. Your rising sign is kind of like your, could be like your personality, kind of like how you are or how you view the world. And then your moon, wherever your moon is kind of like the way that you show emotion. So you might show emotion or you might not, and that could have a lot to do with the planets, and not only what sign your sun falls in, but also what sign your moon falls in. And then it's like, where in the chart is it? So real quick, I'll just tell you the first house right here, if you had planets right there, that has to do with self-awareness, viewpoint, personality, physical energy, independence, self-confidence, assertiveness, appearance, physical body, and new beginnings. Because Aries is at the beginning of the zodiac, so it's like the beginning. And then Taurus is the second house, and that one has to do with self-reliance, affluence, resources, finances, wealth, talents, values, self-worth, possessions, material values, sensual pleasures. So if there was someone who had a lot of planets in the second house, then they might be someone who likes to accumulate possessions, whereas to you, it might not be really important to you because you don't have any planets in there, might explain why, whereas someone who does, it might be very important to them. And then Gemini is the third house, and if you have planets in that house, that is the house of communication, rational mind, intelligence, thoughts, ideas, writing, environment, siblings, and neighbors. And then if you had planets in the fourth house of Cancer, Cancers usually are all about home and family, and that's the house of feelings and nurturing others, affection, emotional security, home and family, past, land, traditions, and privacy. So someone who has planets in the fourth house, they might be more of a private person, and they don't really want to expose a lot of their emotions or themselves. They might be kind of what people call introverted, or someone who kind of keeps to themselves. And then Leo is someone who, I'm just going to go over the bottom ones. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just to give you an idea, the fifth house, Leo, has to do with self-expression, passion, creativity, playing, romance, pleasure, fun, excitement, children, art, entertainment, and startups. So you might notice that Leos, they're usually good leaders. And if you have planets in that fifth house, then you might be someone who, enjoys art and the finer things in life. You like to have fun, you're romantic, and they're usually really loyal too. Leos are. And then Virgo is the last one on the bottom down here, and that's the sixth house. And the sixth house has to do with self-improvement, crafts, environment, service, helping others, improve habits, charity, routine, work, health, diet, and skills. So a lot of times Virgos are people that either are artists because they're really good with their hands. I've known a lot of Virgos who are amazing artists, but then they're also people who really enjoy helping others. So, some people, when someone asks for help, they're like, oh my gosh, and they just don't want to help. That's not a Virgo. Usually a Virgo wants to help. They enjoy helping others. It actually makes them feel good. So if you feel like that and you're not a Virgo, then it might be because you have planets in the sixth house. And so you really enjoy helping others, and you actually get satisfaction and, gratification from it. So I do. I really enjoy that. I actually have my moon in Virgo. So, Virgos can be kind of critical. They could be judgmental on, if you looked at the aspects that were extreme, if a Virgo was out of balance. But if they're balanced, they can be very creative and nurturing and motherly and fatherly and, just kind of like someone who enjoys taking care of others, maybe like nurses, something like that. So now that you have a couple of those ideas, if you didn't before, then you could kind of start asking people, in specific professions, what their sign is. And then you might start seeing a correlation of a lot of occupations where people enjoy helping others. They might be Virgos, and if they're not, it's not it's hard to tell about people's charts because you would have to know the time that they were born and the exact spot. For some of the planets, it doesn't really matter because they move kind of slower, but for some, you would really need to know those specifics in order to give an accurate reading, Like I said, for planets that move slower, if you knew about the time or something like that, you might be able to get a general reading. But if you can really narrow it down, then that's going to make it more accurate for you. And then each of the planets, not only, where the planet falls, but each planet has its own kind of characteristics and properties to it. So, it could be that if you have like Mars is a planet of, could be like a planet of, kind of like anger or warrior mode or something like that. And depending on where that is in your chart could show a lot of like, what you feel protective of or what's important to you, things like that. And in the mother-daughter retreat, we actually have an astrologer coming in, Ash, the tree witch, and she's going to be talking about Mercury and where that falls in your chart. You can actually go on our mother-daughter weekend for the Women's Empowerment and Spiritual Awakening Retreat event page, and you can see a lot of what's being offered on there. There's even more than what we have on there, and we have a really fun weekend planned for the mothers and daughters. That's for daughters age 10 and up, and we're staying in lakeside cottages. There's actually 4 cottages, and the participants stay in 2 of them. One of the cottages is fixed up. I mean, all the cottages are really cute, but one of them is fixed up really cute with like Buddhas and crystals and an esoteric library and a big wide open space where, we can do meditation, yoga, have workshops if weather is not permitting for us to do it outside. So that's kind of like the common area. And then the other cabin is for the facilitators to stay in. And that's where we all join and have meals and have cooking classes and all that fun stuff. There's 2 nights lodging included in the retreat. There are 6 fresh, organic, vegetarian meals with 6 cooking classes that you can also attend. And you're more than welcome to bring any kind of watercraft that you enjoy. We're right on the lake. So if you have any kind of paddleboard or canoe or kayak, you might want to bring that because we enjoy beautiful sunsets there and sunrises, and eagles are flying over. We hear loon calls, and it's a very magical place. It's very private, and there's not a lot of interruptions or outside noise. It's just really peaceful, and you can go look at the reviews. All the women who have attended have really enjoyed themselves, to the point where the women from last year's retreat are all gathering again as a community. We're getting together and just enjoying the space because it is such a beautiful space, and having our own kind of little retreat. So we're definitely creating communities of non-judgmental women who are like-minded and enjoy spending time in nature and talking about stuff that people might call woo-woo. And if you have a daughter that you would love to make some new friends, have some like-minded people that she can go to, explore her spirituality with in a safe space with no judgment, and like I said, maybe make some new friends, then we would love to have you join us. You can sign up at naturesmysteries.com. And this week, like I said, there will be an astrology workshop there. And we're also having chakra cleansing and meditations. There's a pendulum workshop, and everyone's going to make a pendulum. We have intention setting kits, and there's a workshop about setting healthy boundaries for young ladies. So we're really trying to empower these young women so that when they leave, they've had a thoroughly enjoyable weekend, but they also are leaving with skills and tools that they can use in the outside world to help them deal with any kind of stress or any other situations that they might need to deal with. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. And next week, we're going to be talking about, actually, these guys threw me off, and I don't remember what we're going to be talking about next week. Just going to call it out instead of sitting here and guessing. But you can go, we have our schedule up on our Facebook page, and you can see the whole month of July, what we'll be discussing. And we would love to have you join us at the retreat. Like I said, if you want to sign up, you can sign up today at naturesmysteries.com. There's only 2 spaces left, and we would love for you to be 1 or 2 of them. So when I say 2 spaces, I mean 2 more pairs of mother-daughter pairs. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I hope you learned a little bit about your natal chart, how to get it done, and what the different planets could mean and where they fall in your chart, and a little bit about the houses if you weren't familiar with that, just to give you a little bit of the astrology basics. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. Open the door to your spirituality.